SEC coaches to worry about Nick Saban and, apparently, one more chance for Butch Jones to save his job. It's all on the way next on AT&T SEC Country Live. Hello, everyone, and welcome to AT&T SEC Country Live. My name is Brandon Adams. This is the former Alabama All-American Mike Johnson. Busy hour for us as we talk about everything from the weekend for the SEC. That includes Mark Burnett, who covers the Crimson Tide of Alabama, less than 20 minutes from right now. And 40 minutes after the hour, we'll say hello to Alex Hickey, who covers LSU, to talk about a big LSU win versus Ole Miss. Not a long, deep schedule in the SEC this past weekend, but certainly plenty to talk about.
Yeah, some of the games got out of hand that you expected to. Somehow Alabama found a way to cover the 37 points that they were favored in that game, and somehow after that, Butch Jones still has a job, too. Yeah,
so we'll get into all that, including right now, by reminding you that AT&T, a proud sponsor of AT&T's SEC Country Live. AT&T, entertainment your way. Make the switch to AT&T Wireless and DirecTV. They'll help you stay connected all season long. And speaking of Alabama, let's make them the subject of item number one on our AT&T SEC Country Live First and 10 list as we look at that blowout victory for the Tide in Tuscaloosa against the Tennessee Vols. And really, maybe a little bit of a slow start for Alabama, not a crisply played first half for the Crimson Tide. So much so that when Nick Saban spent some time at halftime with CBS sideline reporter Ali LaForce, he barely could contain his desire to kind of get back in the locker room and correct some of the errors that he saw from his Alabama players. But in hearing Saban talk about what he didn't like about Alabama, I think we get a bit of a realization about why the rest of the SEC needs to be fearful of the Crimson Tide. Let me let you see the video captured by somebody on Twitter, and you'll get a sense for the conversation we're going to have here.
I'm not really pleased with the way we played, even though in the last two drives we were a little better.
How do you make sure they have that sense of urgency that you asked for to start this game?
I don't know. I'm going to use all my psychological disposition that I can at halftime. I'm trying to be nice to you.
Now, listen, you can say whatever you want about that, but that's not angry Saban. We've all seen some version of angry Saban. People like me in the media see angry Saban all the time. You saw the angry Saban behind closed doors with the player. You've told some great stories about that over the years. We've all seen angry Saban. That's not angry Saban. Yeah. Here's my point. If Saban, after a first half, which I didn't think his team played that great, if he's not angry, that means he's not worried. The reason why he's not worried, I would hypothesize, is because he knows his team's got it together right now, and he's able to push whatever button he needs to. Is that interview, in your mind, a warning sign for the rest of the SEC?
I think it definitely was a warning sign for Tennessee when you look at the second half. I think that's really what you have to look at in terms of how Nick Saban reacted. He knew that Tennessee was not going to be a threat in the second half. This is a Tennessee team that hasn't scored an offensive touchdown since the first half of the UMass game. I think that's really what he was kind of probably feeling pretty good about. You know what? Our defense hasn't played great. Our offense hasn't played that great. We're going to do some things in the second half. But you mentioned it. This is a dangerous sign. I think that a looser Nick Saban, to me, points to the fact that he's very confident in this team.
And your point is probably a good one here, that it could be that this is not such a global view of how Saban looks at his team in comparison to the entire season, but what's supposed to be one of his biggest rivals, Tennessee, he just ain't worried about the Vols.
Yeah.
I mean, that may be the thing. He may see some things about his team that he doesn't love, but it's not going to affect the team against Tennessee. There is a chance that his sort of joshing moment with Ali LaForce is just simply based on the fact that he knows that Tennessee on 1,000 Saturdays is not going to be good enough to step up and stop the Crimson Tide.
Yeah, I almost got that feel watching the interview that he was like, you know what, we tried to get cute a couple times there in the first half. We're not going to get cute in the second half. We're going to put the pedal to the metal and be able to do the things that we know we can win. We know we can win against Tennessee, and we're going to do those things. So I thought Ali LaForce looked a little bit happy that she didn't get the can opened up on her. She was kind of sitting there like a little bit timid, like, I haven't played real well in the first half. I don't want him to get him to yell at me, but it was a looser Nick. It was a looser football team in the second half as well, and I thought they ended up playing pretty good.
And, we're seeing this thing kind of unfold nationally where a lot of teams have had just a hard time kind of keeping pace with what was supposed to be contenders to Alabama before the start of the season. Now, for Florida State, it's been largely due to injury. DeAndre Francois, if he stays healthy, maybe this is a slightly different team, but Ohio State's lost a game. Michigan, Jim Harbaugh, supposed to be a threat to Alabama. They're not even on the national landscape right now. USC got clobbered by Notre Dame. A lot of these teams, Oklahoma losing a couple weeks ago to an Iowa State team as a 30-point underdog. A lot of these teams that we would have thought of as contenders to Alabama, they're kind of falling by the wayside. And when you look at Nick Saban, the fact that apparently he, at least based on my reading of this, he's less worried about that than maybe some other coaches would be, kind of giving an indication about how much of a gap is still existing between Alabama and a lot of the rest of the country.
Well, and I think this is finally a Nick Saban that says, hey, you know what, my birthday's coming up next week. We're on a bye week. Maybe Maybe I'll go to the lake house for a day or two. Maybe I'll do a little bit of recruiting, but not much. And this is the newer version of Nick Saban. He'll be 66 next week, and it really feels to me like he's comfortable. Obviously, the task against LSU after the bye week is going to be a tough one. You're still looking down the pipe at Auburn later in the year, but I think Nick likes where this team is, and I think he likes the personalities on this team as well. I think he sees the fact that they have a ton of true freshmen playing right now. He likes the leadership that you've seen on defense in the stretch run of the season, and this is a team that's getting healthy as well. I mean, they're getting Josh Jacobs back from some of his early season injuries, Anthony Jennings, Rashawn Evans. This is a team that I feel like is rounding into the form to be a Nick Saban team down the stretch.
Anthony Spencer in the comment section says, right now the rat poison's on the shelf. Don't bring out the rat poison anymore this year. But Anthony, here's the point I'm kind of trying to make. The rat poison Nick Saban, who was kind of like complaining about positive coverage of his team a couple of weeks ago, that sort of seems like a long time ago now. Since then, we've had the guy spinning around on the go-kart or like the scooter, whatever that was, and a couple of other, when he
touched the wind sign.
He jumps up and touched the sign. He looks over at his SID, gave a wink the other day. I don't know if this is just perception, but there is an element of Saban right now that just sort of seems like he's having more fun. Do you think that Saban is having more fun right now?
I don't think there's any doubt about it. I mean, he had his fun with the team sometimes, when I was there, obviously. But I think the fact that he's in the stretch run and he has won 4 national titles at Alabama, I think he is a lot more relaxed. And like I said, I think it has a lot to do with where his team's at right now, too. And this is just not the tight SEC West that I feel like we've seen in the past. Now, LSU needs their credit. Auburn needs their credit, but I think that Nick likes where this team's at. Like I said, I think he sees that Jalen Hurts is growing, a Tua that can back him up and play well, and a team that's getting healthy. And I don't know that he sees the need to be acting all crazy right now. I think he says, you know what? We can put in our work, and this team's going to get down to work during the middle of the week.
There's another theory here, and I'm not going to fully espouse this because Kirby Smart's only been doing this for a short period of time. It's not fair at all to compare him to Nick Saban yet, but he is a guy that's doing some Saban-like things and maybe doing them in a more fun-loving way because Kirby is just younger. I mean, he's just a younger guy, maybe more energetic because of that, and he almost seemed like he was the younger version of Nick Saban. And what Saban showed you over the last couple of weeks is he may be capable of being the younger version of Nick Saban himself, maybe.
Yeah, well, I think it's fun, too, and I think it speaks to recruits. I mean, as much as you love Nick Saban and his ability to be workmanlike, especially Alabama fans, they love it. I think you do look around sometimes, specifically with where they are in recruiting right now. I think you do, have a tendency to look around the conference and look at the head coaches and say, you know what? Maybe he looks in the mirror and says, I need to lighten up too. I'm having fun, we're winning, and the fun is in the winning, and let me go out and be a little bit more lighthearted.
Jessica K. Linquist says he's not going to eat your rat poison. I'm sure if he was hearing this right now, he would, even though it's coming from one of his former players, he would think that would certainly rat poison. That's probably true. We'll talk more about Alabama throughout the program today, including with Mark Burnett coming up in about 10 minutes or so. Before that, though, let's move on to item number 2 on our AT&T SEC Country Live First and 10 list, and the other side of the game on Saturday, where I made the prediction after last week that Butch Jones would probably not coach another game for Tennessee and would not do his weekly press conference this week, coming off of what we all thought was going to be a loss to the Alabama Crimson Tide. But Butch Jones is, at least for now, sticking around. And I thought Mike Griffith, who covers Tennessee for SECCountry.com and makes frequent appearances here on AT&T SEC Country Live, had an interesting report up at SECCountry.com looking at the future for Jones. What Mike writes is, a source close to the Tennessee program told SEC Country before the game against Alabama that an Alabama loss would not necessarily make Jones' termination imminent. But the quote here is, the Kentucky game will be crucial, the source said. Are you okay with the remainder of the season for Tennessee being an opportunity for Butch Jones to save his job?
No, and not only am I not okay with it, I don't believe it. I don't believe for one second that you have a Tennessee team, by the way, who is an underdog to Kentucky this year. I don't see how him going out and dealing with things throughout the end of the schedule is going to save his job. Kentucky, Southern Miss, Mizzou, LSU, Vanderbilt. And to me, even if he runs that slate, this is a Tennessee team who hasn't scored an offensive touchdown, like I said, since the first half against UMass. You haven't been close against Georgia. You haven't been close against Alabama. You get beat by a bad Florida team. I don't know, and this is just my opinion, and obviously Tennessee fans are going to feel their own way. I just don't know what they're waiting on. What are you waiting on? Are you really waiting to see if you get beat by Kentucky? This is a proud Tennessee program. Are you really waiting to see if you get beat by Kentucky to fire your coach? I don't believe that that's what's going to save him. Not only that, but I don't think that that's actually true what Mike Griffith said. I'm sure that he heard that. But even if this guy runs the table, I've got to believe he's going to get fired.
Well, one of the reasons why I think it's a bad idea for Tennessee is because there's a chance this could happen. It's not some great event. In the LSU game, looks tougher for Tennessee now than it probably did 2 or 3 weeks ago. But this is still not some gauntlet of a schedule where Jones would necessarily prove all that much if he were to go out and win all these games. Maybe this is sort of an arbitrary line in the sand to draw, but I would have been okay with Tennessee keeping Jones after a 9-3 season, which included a win against South Carolina and the loss to Alabama, but that's not going to happen. the South Carolina game was given away. And so it's almost like you moved the goalpost here in another direction to make it a little easier for Butch Jones to cross it by saying, okay, you didn't beat South Carolina. We never even counted the Alabama game, but now you got to beat Kentucky. At that point in time, you're setting the bar so low that he actually might surpass it. And that leads to a great point that you brought up. Is that good enough for Tennessee? Does that give you enough to kind of hold on to recruiting class, which based on a national ranking standpoint still looks okay, but the truth is Tennessee's either about to have or already had decommitments, lining up a long list of decommitments coming here. Holding a class together in December, which there is an early signing period this year, holding that class together in December with Butch Jones, your head coach, is going to be easier said than done. I would have made the move right after the Alabama game. That way you don't run the risk of him playing and coaching so well that you're forced to keep him, because keeping him is a consolation prize.
Yeah, no, I agree with you. And I think, obviously the opinions come out, and Paul Feinbaum said that maybe his buyout's a little bit less if they don't make a bowl game. Maybe that's something they're waiting on to the end of the year, see if they don't have to pay him as big of a buyout. But it's like I said, if you're really going to measure your head coach against Kentucky, a proud Tennessee program, and you're going to see if he beats Kentucky as an underdog, if he's going to try to find a way to beat Kentucky, I just don't believe it. I think there's other sources to look at. I think that you can look at, like you said, possibly keeping your recruiting class together, making the buyout a little smaller. Maybe they already have their feelers out to some of these coaches, specifically the ones that are unemployed, Gruden, Kelly, Les Miles. I mean, I don't know who it is. Maybe you already have your feelers out. Maybe you want that transition to be very quick so the recruits don't leave. That's the only thing I can think of. I mean, coming out of this game, it was such an ugly game by Tennessee's offense. You've made the quarterback change already this year. I think Garantano had 44 yards passing in this game. I just don't know what you're waiting on. This team is stagnant. They have not done anything. They're not even showing up in half these games. And somehow Alabama covers a 37-point spread in a rivalry game. And if you're Tennessee fans right now, you have to be asking your questions. And I think John Curry's got to be careful.
Yeah.
Because he could find himself in the crosshairs of Tennessee fans into the season as well.
Scarlet Red Path Simpkins says, what's next? Beating teams like Vanderbilt, Missouri. I mean, that almost proves as much as being a Kentucky team. They just got blown out by Mississippi State. Bo Molinari says Butch is a winner at life, Butch says. Chris Crump says, I'd like to see Arkansas get a young up-and-coming coach, maybe Mike Norville. The guy out of Memphis is a possibility. People talking about those possibilities on the heels of this Butch Jones conversation. Bo Molinari also says that Butch Jones is winning at life, but he's losing at four-star recruits. That's really the issue. It's that next generation of Tennessee player that's kind of looking in on this, and how could you sort of sell the buzz at Tennessee as being anything that a young guy wants to be a part of unless it's simply a transactional relationship of, well, I know I can go play there because look how few answers they have on the lineup on either side of the ball right now. That's about the only thing it would seem that Tennessee has to sell at the moment.
I don't know what it is. I mean, you can talk about the injuries. God knows that LSU's had to deal with them, and they've had their down moments this year as well. But, how long are we going to stick with that? At what point is that Butch Jones' fault that you keep getting injuries and don't have the depth to back it up? We've used two quarterbacks. We've had people transfer. We've had people leave the program. And I have to believe that the Tennessee fans in themselves looking in the mirror know that this is an issue. And it is interesting because I still feel like you do have the split on Tennessee fans, at least the one I talked to. You've got 3 or 4 that are like, man, we got to fire this guy today. And there's one that's like, hey, maybe he's saving most of the game plan for Kentucky because he knows he's not going to beat Alabama. I mean, it kind of blows my mind, kind of the opposites that you hear coming from some of these people.
All right, we'll talk to Mark Burnett about the Alabama Crimson Tide, the team that beat Tennessee on Saturday. Coming up in just a couple of moments before that, though, let's do item number 3 on our AT&T SEC Country Live First and 10 list. Cliff Nelson in our comment section a moment ago was saying, yeah, go Tigers. Let's talk about those Tigers who did roll again on Saturday, and they keep it rolling with an easy win against Ole Miss. And this time, what maybe makes this game even more good news for the average LSU fan is you're starting to see the Tigers propelled here by some of those star players. We'll show you this graphic of the big name on offense, Darius Geis, the big name on defense, Arden Key. They both come up in a big way. Geis, who has 276 yards and a touchdown against Ole Miss on Saturday. Not to be outdone by that, the star linebacker, Arden Key, who on Saturday gives you 2 sacks and 2 tackles for a loss. These were 2 names, Key and Geis, not that long ago that some people were wondering, have they checked out on the LSU season? Are they thinking about the NFL draft and not even thinking about their college future at all? And yet now you see them really coming into their own. Yep. Is this an example of 2 guys who are going to keep this light on for the rest of the season? And is it one of those things they had to shake off the cobwebs of the ugly start and not focus too much on their future?
I think they definitely were. If you ask me, looking back, and I'm not going to question both these guys' performance or both their health, but I think that there has been kind of a feeling that, hey, you know what, we do need to look out after our future. And you saw it last year with Leonard Fournette a little bit as well, where it's kind of iffy. Should I get in these games? How many of these games should I play? And I think it went to bite him in the butt against Troy. I think that was a wake-up call for this team. That hey, these stars, Darrell Williams, Arden Key, like we talked about, Grant Delpit, they've got to get back to playing the game. They've got to play for LSU before they play against anybody else. I thought Arden Key looked good. I think he looked healthy. I think that he finally got his weight down to a comfortable level. And Darius Geis, welcome back to SEC play. I mean, 276 yards. He looked as explosive as also Darrell Williams gets 100 rushing yards himself and maybe 100 receiving yards.
Yeah, it's that receiving yards because I had a chance to watch a good bit of this game. Boy, Georgia didn't play on Saturday, so I wasn't in Athens. I was able to kind of watch some of these games. And the thing I was really impressed with was how Matt Canada, the offensive coordinator, was using Darrell Williams as a receiver. Sometimes it's that misdirection where you just take the easy throw and give the ball to Williams there at that point in time. For me, this was an example of Canada kind of getting his sea legs under him a little bit. All of a sudden, as the LSU offensive coordinator, in addition to this team winning a lot more, Canada as a play caller, to me, starts to feel a lot more comfortable. Some of that Les Miles, Cam Cameron stuff from the past, that feels very much in the past for LSU right now.
Oh, and by the way, you're getting your offensive line back healthy as well.
Yeah.
I mean, when they played Auburn a couple weeks ago, you start 3 true freshmen on that offensive line. They're starting to get back healthy. Toby Weathersby, starts to look himself. KJ Malone played pretty well in this game. I thought this was Matt Canada's best game. Danny Etling, ho-hum, 200 yards. I mean, he's been so efficient this year. I feel like we don't talk about him because he doesn't have any of those breakout 300-yard passing games, but he's been very efficient. 9 of 13, 200 yards this weekend. I think he continues to do the right things for this offense.
In our comment section, Roderick Dugas brings up the point of maybe LSU being good enough to challenge Alabama coming up in a couple of weeks. We'll talk to Mark Burnett about that here in just a moment, who covers the Alabama Crimson Tide for SECCountry.com. Before we do that, though, let me remind you, I'm Brandon Adams. That's Mike Johnson's. This is AT&T SEC Country Live. It's good to have you with us. It's good to have AT&T as a proud sponsor of SEC Country Live. AT&T, entertainment your way. Make the switch to AT&T Wireless and DirecTV. Stay connected all season long. Let's check in now in Tuscaloosa, Alabama. We'll talk a little bit about the LSU game. But, Mark, before we get into the LSU game coming up in a couple of weeks, let me look back on Saturday and a point that I've made a few times here in the program as of late because of some different video that we've shown. Are we seeing a looser, more relaxed Nick Saban this year? I thought the halftime interview with Allie LaForce might be an example of that, of a guy who's just confident that he can push whatever buttons he needs to push with his team, and all of a sudden the sort of hard-driving, perfectionist Saban, he seems to be a little more relaxed this year to me than maybe he's been in the past. You're with him every day. How would you view that? Oh, we're having an audio.
You see him, and he's
Go ahead, Mark. We got you. Go ahead.
Oh, so I think it's a little bit of both. I think it's a situation where, I think he understands that maybe he does need to lighten up. But at the same time, he's still able to send a message at times as well. So I think it's a situation where Saban is trying to show a different side of his personality, so that he's not always just a dictator who's going to come out and just tell everybody what to do. I think he wants to show off to recruits and sort of this younger generation that he can open up and have a little fun.
I know we just got done with last week's game, but we're already getting comments in the comment section about 2 weeks from now against LSU, and obviously that's going to be a primetime game on CBS. Because LSU is winning, has the outlook for that game changed maybe from where it was after the Troy game where Alabama thought it would not be challenged by the Crimson Tide? All of a sudden, or by the Tigers, all of a sudden now, is this the kind of game that sort of feels like Alabama-LSU again?
I don't think anybody on Alabama's side was overlooking LSU. I think they understand that this game is always going to be a tough one, always going to be physical. And, this situation where Alabama respects LSU just as much as anybody in the country because LSU has pushed them over the years. Even in some of the games that have been kind of blowouts for Alabama, they've still been physical for at least a half. And I think it's a situation where Alabama really respects LSU and what they do on the field.
But you would agree, though, Mark, it's getting a little easier to respect LSU given the fact they've now won, 3 straight against a big rival and 2 well-respected SEC teams. Respecting LSU gets a little easier once they're winning games, though, right?
Oh, yes, certainly. I mean, you don't want a team coming in here off a loss to Troy, but I think at this point Alabama understands that it's all about them. I mean, I think no matter what the rest of the schedule is, Alabama is going to be, better than everybody on the schedule. Probably be a 15-point or more favorite. I think I saw early line they were a 24-point favorite over LSU. So I just don't know how LSU can come in here and really move the ball on Alabama. I think what they do offensively really plays well into the hands of Alabama's defense.
Mark, you and I got a chance to talk Saturday night, and one of the people we talked about was Rashaan Evans and his kind of journey back to health. And going back and watching the game yesterday, I noticed the guy on the offensive side of the ball is the same way, and Josh Jacobs really kind of rounding in form. He's becoming a bigger part of that offense. How big in your mind are these 2 players coming back to health for the stretch run of this team?
Oh, I think it's huge. Starting with Rashaan Evans, I think he's the emotional leader on that defense. He's a guy who, we hear a lot about Minka Fitzpatrick's versatility, and rightfully so, but Rashaan Evans does everything you need a guy to do in that front seven. I mean, you talk about a guy who can play inside, outside, rush the passer, very physical against the run, can cover at times as well. He's a guy who I think is going to be huge for this defense if they're able to finish this thing off and make a championship run. But for Jacobs, I think he's a guy who sort of gives them a little bit of a change of pace from Damian and Bo Scarborough. I really like Jacobs' games. I think in terms of talent, he's right up there with anybody on the team. He's a guy who can do a little bit of everything, run between the tackles, but also is very shifty, very elusive. Very rarely does the first guy bring Josh Jacobs down.
Hey, Mark, thanks for making some time for us here on AT&T SEC Country Live today. Hope your visit to the drugstore goes okay. We'll look forward to talking to you here on the program again very soon.
I'm actually sitting outside of Saul's barbecue in Birmingham.
Oh, yeah.
Just had a lot of barbecue. So
Listen, that is a very authentic place to be coming to us from, and I hope the meal treated you well.
it did. Thank you, guys.
Good stuff there from Mark Burnett. Now, have you been to Saw's there in
I have.
Birmingham?
Oh,
I've never
man.
actually been there before.
Oh, man, it is something else.
I've been to the original Dreamland in Tuscaloosa, right there on, what is it, Jug Factory Road?
Something like that,
Jug
yeah.
Factory Road in Tuscaloosa. I've been there for that, but I've never been to Saw's in Birmingham before.
Saw's is very good. I
They
tried to
had
hit
a
his
fire at Saw's recently, right?
Yeah, no, at Archibald's.
That's right, that's where it was,
Archibald's.
yeah,
Saw's
yeah.
up there in Birmingham is something else too, though. Goodness.
So good stuff there from Mark Burnett. By the way, in their comment section, Esteban Esteves on LSU was also talking about the performance of Danny Etling, the quarterback, on Saturday. I was also impressed with that, and for me, that's not an easy thing to say because I've been hard on Etling leading into the season, but he's actually having a better year than I would have given him credit for. We're going to talk to Alex Hickey about that in about 15 minutes here on AT&T's SEC Country Live. Before that, though, let's move on and look at item number 4 in our AT&T SEC Country Live First and 10 list. And Georgia and Florida were off on Saturday, but they were off and running today, at least on the Florida side of things, with a little bit of trash talk getting ready for Saturday's renewal of the world's largest outdoor cocktail party rivalry. Let me show you a couple of examples as captured by Jordan McPherson, one of our Florida writers that covers the Gators for SECCountry.com. Here's Chauncey Gardner, the Florida defender, on quarterback Jake Fromm for Georgia. He says he's throwing simple passes. I get it. Anybody can throw a slant. That's what Gardner says about Jake Fromm. I believe we also have something here coming from wide receiver Josh Hammond, who brings up the fact that Florida's won 3 straight against Georgia. And the quote from Hammond is, they might be the number 3 team, but they can't beat Florida. So you have Hammond and Gardner, a couple of Florida players, weighing in with, I think that's actually some legitimate trash talk style bulletin board material here leading into the game against Florida on Saturday. For Georgia, is this a good idea for the Gators?
Well, you know, we talked about this back during the summer and about Chauncey Gardner and trash talk. And I'm not a big guy on trash talk. I think it was funny when it came up against Vanderbilt between Alabama. And I thought, you know what, good for that guy. But listen, this is what Florida has become. They are owning this right now. I mean, they've become the trash talker. Chauncey Gardner, I know when he was recruited, he was called the mouth of the South. This is something we're not, this is not shocking, I guess, is where I'm going with this. I don't think it's shocking for anybody to look at this Florida team and say, what, you know what, they're confident, they're talking trash. Georgia's obviously a huge, going to be a huge upside. Florida's going to be a big underdog in this game. But they're all kind of making, not valid points, but good trash talk. I think that there's a lot of angles to look at this, and I like that Florida's kind of going into this game with a chip on their shoulder.
Well, I don't mind a chip on your shoulder, but we've already seen an example from this year about how this did not work for Florida. I mean, if it's a chip on your shoulder, then Mark Thompson saying he was looking forward to seeing Florida beat the brakes off of Michigan, that would have worked. The fact of the matter is, Michigan's looked terrible against everybody they played, except they kicked Florida in the face to start the season. So maybe these sort of like, trash talking statements going into a game, I mean, maybe Florida's got some evidence that doesn't really work out all that well.
It is definitely Florida-Georgia week for my man BA here. You can tell that he's got that extra edge to him this week.
But there is one thing that's true, though. You do have to admit this. You brought this up. Jim McElwain allows this. For the good or for the bad, McElwain allows this. And, for the people who always sort of count sort of this paint-by-number opinion that the SEC is a bunch of Saban clones, McElwain, a guy that worked for Saban, this is one way in which the apple falls very far from the tree. Now, the results on the field probably fall very far from the tree as well, but this is one way in which I'm just talking. I'm not even saying anything.
Okay.
But this is one thing that's very un-Saban-like when it comes to McElwain.
Yeah.
Saban's not allowing this kind of stuff.
Well, and I'm actually kind of shocked at how far this has gone with Jim McElwain because he is a looser coach. He's one of those guys that loves being kind of a player's coach, and he does a little bit of trash talking himself where, after the LSU game last year, he said, they got what they deserved, and that's just kind of been the nature of the beast for Florida. And I think the fact that they haven't had a good year just kind of magnifies that. But listen, I thought that Kirby Smart went to the other side of the rope with this weekend when he went to his team and said, hey, how many of you have beat Florida? I mean, he was kind of doing the opposite thing where, hey, look, we have to get over this hump. Let me kind of highlight the recent history between these two teams in the last 25 or 30 years has been in Florida's favor as well. And so I think that Florida players and Georgia players together are not deaf to that. And so I don't mind so much the fact that Florida players brought it up.
Let me hit a few of the comments. Terry Cruz in the comment section says, Curry says thank you to the young man for the bulletin board material. That really is true, though, and you can speak to this because you lived through this at Alabama. You watch your team, Alabama, going through this right now. When you are the number 3 team in the country and you're playing as a 2-touchdown favorite, even against a rival, there is that fear that, oh, okay, are we going to treat this like we've treated every other game so far this season? When you have these moments of Florida players saying what they're saying, it just makes it easier to make sure whatever edge you had before the bye week, you take that to Jacksonville with you here. And I think it does help Georgia. I'm not telling you it helps Georgia win the game, and if Georgia wins, you're going to draw the line and say, oh, that's what Chauncey Gardner and Hammond, the receiver, said that made it all possible. But it helps you get ready for the game, I would think.
No, I think so. And listen, I think that Kirby Smart was going to do that either way. I mean, I'm sure there's posters up around. There's probably pictures of the scoreboard from the last few games they've had and the fact that they haven't beat Florida in quite some time. And that's not to say that Georgia hasn't been favored in this game a couple times either, because they have, a few years ago and got beat by a couple touchdowns from Florida. So I'm not shocked that Kirby did it. This is exactly what I expect from Kirby, to be able to try to turn some of this trash talk against Florida. But either way, they still have to go out and perform on the field, and I think it's going to be a tough game.
Ab Harding says, losers the only ones who resort to trash talk. When you're good, you don't have to belittle anyone. It's all good. We know you're scared, Florida. So Ab brings up an interesting point. Is this true that Florida is scared of Georgia and this is sort of a false bravado, or is this just the only team left that a 3-3 Florida team feels like it has that kind of edge? And you can't say this going to the Florida State game at the end of the season, because Florida State's won 4 straight against Florida. Florida's obviously dropped some games this season, but is this the Gators just using the bragging rights where they still have them? And every Georgia fan has to admit that when it comes to the Georgia-Florida rivalry, the Gators do have those bragging rights. Is that what this is?
I don't know if it's bragging rights so much, but I think that Florida players, when they talk like this, I think they're kind of embracing the underdog role. I think they're saying, you know what, Georgia's really good. They're ranked 3 in the country. We have not done the things we've been capable of doing on our side to kind of uphold this thing. But when it comes down and you're playing your rivalry there in Jacksonville, it's still Florida against Georgia. It doesn't matter what happened before this. And I think that's kind of Florida's players' option to kind of embrace this and say, you know what, we haven't been very good this year, but we're going to go ahead and knock out Georgia, and that's going to make our season.
Van Bird in the comments section says, one thing that Florida's got to remember is this is not the Mark Richt Georgia team. And for better or for worse, whatever Van's alluding to there certainly feels true, that Mark Richt teams may have been a little bit more willing to tolerate this and maybe not go out there and kind of, shut up Gardner and shut up Hammond for what they said. Something about the edge in which this team has played for. I don't know if it's directly attributable to Kirby Smart or not, but there is an edge to this Georgia team that makes this game more fun because of what the Florida players said.
Well, it goes back to something you and I talked about on Thursday, about as a coach, how do you approach this game? And I think it's different when you're the underdog or when you're the favorite. But I knew that Kirby Smart was going to point some of the history out to these players right now because they haven't beaten Florida recently. And I think that you have to be careful as a head coach, because yes, you want to continue to do the same things that have gotten you to that point. You don't want to play with all this emotion, play out of control, but you also don't want to get to the game and look across the line of scrimmage and having these Florida players that are like, you know what, we're going to knock you off. You're not going to be the number 3 team when you win there. So Kirby has definitely started to cross that road, and I do feel like that these statements from the Florida players will be posted in that locker room.
Ross Burden does bring up a good point, that this is a rivalry game, and this is what rivals are supposed to do.
Yes.
And Georgia fans are bothered by it, but this is only Florida, and I'm saying this obviously as someone who kind of comes from the other direction here, but this is Florida doing what rivals are supposed to do.
Yeah.
They're supposed to hate you. They're not supposed to like you. They're not supposed to say nice things about you. So from that standpoint, I kind of agree with Ross that, hey, at least they're being honest about how they feel going into it.
Well, like I said, I think that kind of highlights the fact that they're the underdog now.
Yeah.
I mean, this has been a Florida team, for the most part, has been favored against Georgia, aside for a couple of games. And I think that Florida saying, hey, you know what, we're not very good this year, but if we have to do something and we're going to do something on a national stage, it's going to be knocking off our rival Georgia as the number 3 team.
All right, we got to move on here. That's Mike Johnson. I'm Brandon Adams. This is AT&T SEC Country Live. AT&T, a proud sponsor of SEC Country Live. AT&T, entertainment your way. And I'm actually not really sure what you're going to say about this. This is item number 5 on our AT&T SEC Country Live first and 10 list here. So Auburn is driving on Saturday night against Arkansas. And in the midst of what turned out to be a Jared Stidham touchdown, you have an Arkansas player appearing to, we'll let you see for yourself and judge for yourself, but an Arkansas player, as captured on social media by a Twitter user, appearing to fake an injury here. The eye in the sky does not lie, as they say. Here is Stidham taking the snap. He fakes the handoff, keeps it himself. He goes in the end zone. But what you don't see unless you were just really looking at the beginning of the play is Watch the middle of the field here. The Arkansas player just lays down on the field, and then when the referee doesn't stop the play, he hops back up and starts to play again, and then turns to the official and argues. You can see that at the corner of your screen and says, hey, man, what are you doing? I'm hurt. Well, if you're hurt, why are you standing there arguing? Why don't you go back and lay down again? Is this what football has become?
By the way, the rest of the Arkansas defense faked being a defense for the rest of that play, too. If you watch everybody else, just kind of stand up and watch him run in the end zone. I mean, nothing else was going on in that play. But listen, I said this to you over the summer, and this kind of alludes back to it, if you ask me. A couple of years ago, Brett Bielema faked getting shoved by Cam Robinson, Alabama's left tackle, and he ended up getting a penalty.
That's really interesting. Really interesting.
I lost so much respect at that time for Brett Bielema. I still respect him as a coach. I still think he's a good coach. But at that time, I thought, you know what? If that's the way you're leading your football team, then some other stuff like this is going to happen, and it finally has. I mean, you see this on the field. This is a Brett Bielema-led kind of thing. I mean, this is a scenario that you're not shocked this is coming from Brett Bielema's football team. I don't think anybody is.
So people are laughing. Cliff Nelson's laughing about this. Zachary Minton's laughing. We've got a bunch of laughing emojis going across the screen here. But if this is your team, I don't think you're laughing about this. Because as you said, this feels like, and you just laid out a really good example of the kind of thing that might be coached into the Arkansas team by Brett Bielema. And I don't want this soccer-style, NBA-style flopping coming to college football here. Yeah. You know, laying down, pretending to be hurt. I don't know. That doesn't feel like what I want to be in college football.
Yeah, it's a bad signal for not only Brett Bielema in Arkansas, but just this defense. I mean, I can't even help but point out to it again that everybody else is looking at him laying on the ground, and they're all getting hit in the mouth by the offensive lineman. And I mean, he just walks into the end zone. And so I think this is kind of a small piece of what you've seen from Arkansas this year. And they just haven't been able to get it done. And it's like, hey, let's find another way to do things. But there's not. You have to go out and play football.
So let me ask you about this. Some coaches, I've been told, will coach their players, hey, if you go down against a spread team, stay down.
Right.
Like, is that a different way to do the same thing? I mean, this video is bad because the guy is standing up and literally like a professional wrestler just takes a fall on the ground. Yeah. Is it different? Is it more acceptable? And it's still dishonest, I guess, and, you know, by the letter of the law, cheating. But to say, hey, if you get hurt, how about you stay down, let somebody come over and check on you? Otherwise, you know, we're going to waste an opportunity to kind of slow down this offense. Right. Is that a little bit more acceptable as a guy that played the game?
I definitely think it's a little more acceptable, but I don't think there's any question what he was trying to get done here. I mean, he was definitely saying, hey, you know what, we're out of position. We don't want to call a timeout right now. Let me just lay down on the field. And the rest of his teammates looked at him like, oh, yeah, good. He laid down on the field, and maybe we won't have to defend this play. It just didn't happen that way. I think it's kind of a slap in the face to other players that are hurt, to be honest with you, when you do this kind of thing, because it takes away from it a little bit. All of a sudden, when you see a guy go down and get injured, maybe in 2-minute drill, the fans start booing him because they expect somebody to lay down, specifically against Gus Malzahn's offense. You've seen it in the past. And so I think it is a little bit of a slap in the face, and I hate seeing it just like you. I don't want to see it.
Let me hit a few comments on this real quick. First of all, people are going in on the Razorbacks. I understand where that's coming from. Some of this is coming from Arkansas fans. Some of this is coming just from SEC observers. This Arkansas team is terrible.
Bad.
And not to show any more life than that against Auburn on Saturday, a team that's not unbeatable, as a lot of teams have shown you so far this season. That's just a really bad look for Arkansas, including Eddie Joseph Leverett, who says Arkansas right now is faking like an SEC team, and that certainly kind of felt that way. Anthony Spencer says, hey, maybe he just caught a quick cramp. Maybe he did. Tyler Goad, an Arkansas fan, says we can't even beat Kansas probably. But how about Brandon Pope's line? He says they should suspend players who take a fake dive. You in favor of some sort of rule book punishment, 15-yard penalty, suspension, ejection for a guy that obviously dives like that?
I would be in favor of it. I just don't know how you enforce it. How are you going to prove the fact that, you know, this guy was down? Maybe he was nicked up and maybe he saw the play was going, so he got back up and did everything he could to try to chase it down. I don't know that you can enforce rules like that. And you kind of see that in the NFL where it's like, hey, do I find this guy? Maybe he was dinged up. Maybe he just reacted to the play going away from him. It's really a tough bridge to cross. And you mentioned Arkansas, not good right now. Now they're going to be without Frank Ragnow for the rest of the year. He had the high ankle sprain in the game. They were already without Austin Allen.
Right.
Go all the way back to the spring.
Although I guess
Raleigh
they
Williams.
like Cole Kelly okay, though,
Cole
right?
Kelly's a big guy, got a live arm, threw for 200
Boy, he
yards
is a
against
giant.
Alabama. I mean,
he's
he's a big fella, man. I mean, he's trying to get it done. They just lack punch right now to me. And I don't want to say this because I don't know for sure, but Brett Bielema's message to me is not getting through to this team. They look like they lack a counterpunch.
A.J. Wood's got a good question. He says, who's worse right now, Tennessee or Arkansas? For me, it's not even close. Arkansas is way worse than Tennessee.
Yeah.
Way worse than Tennessee.
And it's tough, too, because Tennessee's had some tough losses. I mean, when you talk about the Georgia game, when you talk about the Alabama game, when you talk about their performance against UMass, almost losing to UMass, that doesn't look good. But Arkansas, I mean, it's like you said, they have a great performance against a good TCU team, and then all of a sudden they kind of lay an egg against all the other teams they play, and you just really don't know what you're getting from them.
I mean, Tennessee can do some things. They're not going to run it against Alabama, but you can run John Kelly against a lot of SEC teams. I'm not really sure what Arkansas can do right now.
Yeah, I'm not either. And honestly, it's really paper thin if you ask me in terms of what programs are right now. Because Tennessee, I thought that ship had sailed. I thought Butch Jones was gone. All of a sudden, we're still holding on to him. And they don't do – I mean, look at their offense right now. They do not do anything well. Bama had 500 more yards of offense in that game, 608 to 104 for Tennessee, and that just tells you the whole story.
All right, we will get Alex Hickey coming up in just a moment here. We'll talk to him about the LSU win against Ole Miss. Before that, though, let's take a look at item number 6 in our AT&T SEC Country Live First and 10 list. And, well, Danny Cannell, the one-time ESPN personality, former Florida State quarterback, a guy that over the years has been a little bit famous, I would say, as an SEC troll. I don't think that that's necessarily breaking new news to say that this is something that Cannell likes to do. He likes to rank other teams ahead of SEC teams, likes to pick on Bama. They've been at the top now for a while, and Cannell on Twitter, I'm not even sure where he's working these days, but in his latest iteration of kind of his top 8, has Alabama at number 1, but he says it's the worst resume in the top 10. So, Mike, I will ask you as a guy who follows that Alabama resume pretty closely, is there something wrong with Alabama's credentials as the number 1 ranked team and a team fighting for a playoff spot?
I mentioned this last week. I hate when we hindsight schedules. Tell me what it was before the game. Florida State was the number 3 ranked team. By the way, Danny Cannell's alma mater, so maybe he has a little bit of inside info into noticing that Florida State hasn't been very good. It looks like a bad win now when you look back on it. They had DeAndre Francois for 3 quarters in that game, plus some change in the 4th quarter, and they didn't get it done. And then now that he's injured, they look really bad. And I think it's easy to hindsight that and say not a very good win. But I think the funniest part of it is you put Clemson right there at number 2, and they have a loss. And you're sitting there saying they have the best resume out of the top 10 with a loss. I mean, I don't know how you kind of start to compare those two, and then Georgia right behind it. It's like, I'm not sure where he's going.
Yeah, what great thing has Clemson? Was the Louisville win give you a whole lot right now?
No.
Louisville's not the same team it was a year ago, not the same team we thought at the beginning of the season. And, here's the thing about Alabama. You can say what you want about the schedule the Crimson Tide has played up to this point, but they're winning every single one of these games by a wide margin. Yeah. I mean, remember, the blip on the radar for Alabama this year is a road game at Texas A&M, a pretty good team, and they still won by more than a touchdown.
Yeah.
We act like that's Alabama stubbing its toe in College Station. They won the thing by, 9 points, something like that?
Right. And listen, you're talking to a guy who went to Alabama. Obviously, I'm shaded that way, but I still think Alabama has holes. But, I mean, if we're going to talk about teams that have best or worst resume, I'm not listing them anywhere near this. I mean, I'm sorry for Danny Cannell, but if you're talking about Georgia beating Notre Dame on the road, a team who looks great right now after blowing out USC this past weekend, I'm just not sure where he's getting this information.
All right, it's AT&T SEC Country Live. AT&T, a proud sponsor of SEC Country Live. AT&T, entertainment your way. Let's check in Baton Rouge, Louisiana right now. Say hello to Alex Hickey, who covers the LSU Tigers for SECCountry.com. And Alex, before we talk about your team that you cover, LSU, let me bring into the conversation we're just having. Does Alabama, up to this point, have to apologize at all for the schedule that it's played? Do you see a problem with that Crimson Tide resume when you look at it?
I mean, well, yeah, right now it's not what they expected. Obviously, Florida State's not the team they thought it would be. And if you look at Georgia, I mean, Notre Dame is way better than anybody thought that team would be. So if you were weighing those two against each other, there's no question the Dogs have had the better schedule at this point. Texas A&M is kind of the only decent team that they've played so far.
Yeah, that's probably a fair point. Let me shift gears and talk to you about the LSU win against Ole Miss from Saturday. And one of the things we got into on our show a little earlier is the kind of what seems to be an improved performance as of late from Darius Geis, the running back, and Arden Key, the linebacker, certainly against Ole Miss. Those two star players came up in a big way. Are these guys just more focused than they were early in the season? Are they healthier now? How do you explain why we're seeing more from Geis and Key now than we did earlier in the season?
Yeah, it's definitely health in the case of Darius Geis. He sprained his knee against Mississippi State, and he just hadn't been the same since. And he's still not 100%. He said so himself, but he's at least in the 80 to 90 range, I think, and that showed against Ole Miss. He definitely, if he was fully healthy 100%, I think he would have broken the 300-yard mark pretty easily in that game. With Arden Key, it's a little bit of injury, and I guess motivation might have played a role in it because he gained all that weight in the offseason, and it looked like it obviously wasn't just muscle mass. So he's brought his weight back down closer to where he was last year, and his explosiveness is back. So, yeah, those guys are getting into shape sort of from different perspectives at exactly the right time.
We were talking early in the show, some people in the comment section bringing up the performance of quarterback Danny Etling, and I don't mind telling you, Alex, this was a player that during the offseason I was pretty critical of, not because I don't like Etling, just because I didn't think he measured up very well to the other SEC quarterbacks. But when you look at his, passer rating, efficiency, you look at the completion percentages, Etling's actually having a pretty good year. And right now, if you want to kind of have a list of underrated players in college football, you'd probably have to include Etling on that list, would you not?
Yeah, I wrote actually a couple weeks ago, around the time of the Florida game, a column about how, in my mind, Danny Etling compares favorably to Kansas City Chiefs quarterback Alex Smith. He's just kind of a guy that doesn't have a cannon of an arm, but he finds ways to win. He's a little bit more mobile than people would think. He's just kind of a gritty guy, and the team really rallies around his leadership. He's not the prettiest passer, but Danny Etling is a guy who has that locker room, and I think a lot of people don't understand how important that is. But I think you guys definitely can say how far that can go.
Alex, I have a lot of friends in and around Baton Rouge that are fans of that program and follow that program very closely. Talking to them 3 weeks ago, they're like, hey, I hope we don't get blown out by Alabama. And it's so funny how in the last 3 weeks, boy, that sentiment has changed a lot. From the people you talk to down there in and around the program, how are these LSU fans feeling about this big game coming up in Tuscaloosa?
Yeah, obviously there's a lot more optimism in the air. I think the reality is still Alabama should have a significant advantage at home in that game. But people are going in at least thinking, all right, maybe there's a chance that we can pull off the upset. Whereas a couple weeks ago, it was, people were hoping to avoid a score like Ole Miss had against Alabama. But this team has really sort of coalesced and formed around each other, and that's what's got people excited. Even though it's still going to be a massive upset, but it's not a total pipe dream anymore.
Hey, Alex, great to have you here on AT&T SEC Country Live. We'll look forward to speaking to you soon.
All right, guys, thank you.
Look forward to that Alabama LSU game coming up in a couple of weeks here as
that
well.
Batman T-shirt.
Yeah, the Batman T-shirt. Yeah, it's almost like the Jack Nicholson, Michael Keaton era Batman from like late 80s, early 90s. Is that kind of what you're getting from that vibe? Yeah.
You guys in the comment section, cracking me up, man.
All right, item number 7 on our AT&T SEC Country Live First and 10 list. Let me go back to Tuscaloosa for the game on Saturday, where at least one Tennessee Vol did not probably equate himself all that well. After a good moment, you may have seen Rashawn Golden go into the end zone on an interception as soon as he got there. Well, he gave kind of the middle finger salute with both hands, and this did not sit well with a few people around college football, including Kirk Herbstreit, who I thought had a pretty blunt tweet about the Golden situation. We'll show it to you here. He says, even when something goes good for Tennessee, it goes bad. Pick 6, the good. Number 7, flipping off the crowd in Tuscaloosa, down 28-7, the bad. And then he drops a hashtag culture. And I think that's a really interesting thing for Herbstreit to say. A, he's the most recognizable voice in the sport and probably the opinion in the sport that may matter more than any other. And him pointing to the culture is, I think, a really interesting thing to say here, because when I first watched this go down, it's the first thought I had as well. Only coaches who don't have control of their team do stuff like this when they're losing 28-7.
Well, and I'm actually going to disagree with one part of Kirk Herbstreit's tweet. I don't care if you're up 28-7 or down 28-7. You don't double bird the crowd.
That's a good point.
I can't tell you how many times I was flipped off at away stadiums, and it's just something that happens. Everybody's been drinking, tailgating all day. You just don't do it. And I think that the hashtag culture was perfect, though. The way he puts it, I mean, you've seen these stories coming out of Tennessee the last couple of weeks. There's been fights in the locker room. Yeah. There's been people suspended. There's been stitches going on with some of their players. It's not good right now. Right. I mean, you don't know what you're getting out of Jared Garantano, and you feel like he's being more vocal. But is it a good vocal as a freshman guy that's in that locker room and talking a lot? And then you have arguably their best defensive player right now, Rashawn Golden, who is behind that interception return for the touchdown, and he's double birding the crowd. It just, to me, it's Butch Jones's message is lost on the Tennessee football team. This is more ammo, I think, in the opposite direction, because Butch Jones is all, hey, champions of life, we're going to have good guys, and then you got somebody double birding the crowd.
I'll give you some context for this, and then I want to respond to what you just said there. I was watching the CBS broadcast on Saturday, and Gary Danielson said that he thought that Golden was the only player on the Tennessee defense that could start for Alabama. So whether that's true or not, that's not a good look for Tennessee if it is true. But let's assume for a moment that Danielson's right, and at least that Golden is the best, most talented player on the Tennessee defense. That's the guy that's doing the double bird to the crowd, the one guy that you have that can maybe play for Alabama. That's one of the things that makes this worse is it sort of highlights the talent deficiency that Tennessee has, that even the guy that you have that is talented enough here is somebody that you can't trust to behave the right way on the field.
Well, and like I said, it's further information for me that they're not hearing Butch Jones' message, because it's everything you thought Tennessee wasn't. Hey, you know what, Tennessee fans, I've heard from some that, hey, you know what, we don't win every game, we can still hold our heads high because we've got these guys of high character. And that's not what you saw. And I do have to give credit to Rashawn Gall, and he comes out immediately after the game and says, you know what, it's not how my parents raised me. That's not how I represent this program as a leader of Tennessee. So credit to him a little bit for being able to say that right after. But like I said, it's just more an example to me that Butch Jones' message is
I want to defend Golden on that part of it again in just a moment. But what you're saying right now, though, I think is the most important part of this. It ought to be the Tennessee people who are the most bothered by Champion of Life and 5-star hearts and if I've got your back, you've got mine, and we did everything to win the game but score touchdowns. This is not just the kind of thing that SEC fans around Knoxville make fun of. It's the kind of thing that ought to bother Tennessee fans, because at a certain point, you look at the message from Butch Jones and you realize it's not penetrating the skulls of the players that he's trying to lead.
Yeah.
It's one thing to kind of just say whatever you think the media needs to hear to kind of get them off your back, but we also get the impression that he's taking the same thing into his locker room with his players, and it's clearly not working. They're not listening to it.
Well, and you saw the same thing Saturday night from a Michigan player against Penn State. I mean, he's in Happy Valley and gives the birds to the Penn State fans. And my first thought of that one was, that's kind of how Jim Harbaugh, I mean, not that he coaches these guys to give double birds, but he does live life on the edge as a head coach. You know, he's kind of edgy. He can kind of get these players to play hard, but also, you know, does things differently and is not afraid to pick a fight with opposing coaches. That's not what Butch Jones is, and that's more, like I said, that's more information for me to look at this thing, and it's like water off a duck's back. It's just not sticking with these guys. They're not showing the promise on the field that they have given, like in the offseason.
But let me defend this real quick here, and I only bring this up as a way of playing devil's advocate, because ultimately what I thought what Galton did was not acceptable, not the kind of thing you want to see any player in the SEC ever do, winning or losing, to bring your point up. I'm actually surprised, though, that we don't have more moments of guys just losing their temper on the field. Because, listen, you know, I played a church league basketball league for a while. It's like one day a week, the least athletic bunch of guys you've ever seen. People are losing their cool, losing their temper out there at that thing all the time. And all that takes is one guy bumping into you the wrong way. All of a sudden, somebody's ready to fight. This could not be a less competitive sporting event. This is the SEC where guys are colliding with each other. I don't have to tell you this. You played in the thing. Yeah. I'm surprised we don't see more moments of guys just losing their mind on the field. It's actually kind of amazing that it doesn't happen more than it does.
Yeah, I can't tell you the amount of times that before games, middle of games, and after games, I have wanted to do exactly what Rashawn Gall did. I mean, you're kind of doing your walkthrough on the field before you play LSU down in Baton Rouge and Death Valley, and the student section's already full. And every single person there is, telling whatever you need, yelling at Coach Saban, going in for the blackout game against Georgia, going to Auburn and playing in Jordan. I mean, this happens a lot. I mean, you're going to see this from the fans down to the field. You just hate seeing it from the field back to the fans. It is very hard to restrain yourself in a lot of these situations.
Yeah, because every now and then somebody will send me like a tweet or something like that, or a comment on Facebook, and maybe I don't like it, maybe it makes me mad.
Right.
But I'm not competing. I'm not like athletically involved. Right. So I have the time that I need to say, you know what, nothing good comes from responding to this. Let me move on and do something else. But it's that lack of sort of physical contact that makes that possible. You let the wrong thing happen in a moment when you're physically engaged with someone, all of a sudden at that point in time, your ability to kind of control what you say and do in the moment, it's just reduced, it's diminished.
I agree. And listen, I can't let this segment go by without saying I didn't like what Bo Scarborough did last year in Knoxville, where he tries to high-five the hand after the long touchdown run. I thought that was tacky in itself. So that kind of, I don't know if that played into what Rashawn Golden was doing this weekend, but when Bo Scarborough did that last year, I kind of shook my head and meant, that's just not what Alabama football is usually about. Nick Saban doesn't allow that thing to happen. But yet you have it on the flip side this year. I don't want to feel like I'm playing both sides. I hated what Bo Scarborough did last year.
Marshall M.J. Jones in the comment section brings up T. Martin back to Tennessee. And, we're going to have a lot of time to talk about who should be the replacement for Butch Jones there in Knoxville. But if I'm thinking about names, you know me. Yeah. Recruiting really matters to me. Martin's a good recruiter. He's one of those guys I'm going to put very near the top of that list. Not as big a name probably as John Gruden would be. I'm not so sure that T. Martin wouldn't be the better hire, and maybe ought to be celebrated as the better hire.
Yeah, I read something today, and I can't even remember who wrote it, that, or maybe it was Clay Travis that was talking today about how John Gruden's going to be the hire, and he thinks that these quarterbacks that have watched John Gruden on TV will come to play for John Gruden at Tennessee. I don't see it. I don't know. To me, I don't know what the draw is for Tennessee to go out and hire John Gruden. I don't think he's going to be a good recruiter. I think he's been out of football too long, and I don't think it's the right hire. T. Martin, to me, does kind of light me up a little bit. It's kind of like Kirby Smart going back to Georgia. It's T. Martin who's been around successful programs, knows what it's going to take at Tennessee, knows the boosters can raise the money, and maybe that's going to be a good hire for them if they are able to make it.
So we'll have a lot more time to talk about that in the weeks ahead. And apparently we're going to have a few more weeks to think about this because apparently Butch Jones is going to be hanging around Knoxville at least for a little while, assuming they don't lose to Kentucky on Saturday. And as Mike pointed out earlier in the show, they are a point spread underdog right now. That's Mike Johnson. I'm Brandon Adams. This is AT&T SEC Country Live. AT&T, proud sponsor of SEC Country Live. AT&T, entertainment your way. Make the switch to AT&T Wireless and DirecTV. They'll help you stay connected all season long. Let's move on now. Look at item number 8 on our AT&T SEC Country Live first and 10 list. And speaking of former Tennessee coaches, how about Lane Kiffin, who, listen, always finds a way to keep his name in the headlines and keep doing this kind of stuff. It makes him brilliant. I'm not sure it'd make him a good head coach in the SEC again, but it certainly keeps him on the short list of people wondering if somebody does want to come back to the SEC. The latest example of that, we'll show you this on Twitter. On Thursday night, 5-star quarterback Justin Fields, the UGA commit, was playing a big high school football game. It was televised on ESPN2, and Kirby Smart took a helicopter to the game. Well, Lane Kiffin took to Twitter to remind folks that this is Kirby Smart, at least in Kiffin's mind, copying his idea from Tennessee. You see the hashtag there, or I should say the hashtag. I don't know why I put the accent on the wrong part. The hashtag there for Juwan James in 2009, flip from Bama, hashtag Dolphins, at Juwan James 70, Kirby Smart, Georgia, hashtag keep rolling Kirby. Is there anything, I mean, what do you make of this? This is just Kiffin being Kiffin. I think it's kind of smart, even though I don't think Kirby Smart copied this from Lane Kiffin.
No, I agree with you. This is Kiffin being Kiffin. And by the way, like Lane Kiffin acts like he's the first person to ever helicopter in to a thing. I mean, he got half of his recruiting prowess from Nick Saban in the last 3 years probably because Nick's been doing that for a while too. And so this is just Kiffin being Kiffin. This is Lane trying to keep his name out there, trying to stay relevant, trying to get some of these recruitings going down there, and maybe saying, hey, you know what? Let's not let these programs forget about me as a head coach when the job comes up. And we're going to look at a couple of SEC teams that are going to probably fire their head coaches this year. This is Lane's way of kind of keeping his name in the headlines. He knows that he's not the first guy to ever ride a helicopter, but why not post it and hashtag Juwan James and hashtag Dolphins and tag everybody in it and see if you can get some feedback.
I 1,000% agree with what you're saying. And yet that doesn't make for a very good TV show. So let me see if I can provide another opinion as just a devil's advocate viewpoint here. Is there a chance that this is not some calculated move on his part? And you've heard the phrase the
that
lowest.
He's just that arrogant?
Well, no. You've ever heard the phrase that the lowest form of conversation is remember when? The people that go around reminiscing about the past. I mean, is this like the guy who wears like Letterman's jacket, like 1,000 years removed from his high school career? Maybe Kiffin is not calculating and thinking, oh, I'll get my attention, I'll get some tweets, and I'll get some people thinking about me. Maybe he's just scared down there in Coral Gables, Florida, that people are going to forget about him soon. And they're not going to remember this was a guy that generated some headlines when he was Tennessee's coach for a year. And as Alabama's offensive coordinator, this was a guy that did some things right. Maybe this is not such a calculated move to stay relevant as it is sort of a desperate cry for, y'all don't forget that I used to be a football coach in a league that mattered as opposed to down here in Conference USA.
I think that maybe, and I'll play along with you here, maybe it's him looking back and saying, you know what, I have a little bit of void in recruiting right now. I don't know who I'm recruiting against right now. It used to be, when I was at Tennessee, it used to be, Urban Meyer down at Florida. It used to be Nick Saban at Alabama. Maybe he's looking around going, hey, you know what, I'm just kind of recruiting these 3-star guys at Florida Atlantic myself. I want to jump back in the game and maybe fill some of my time. Maybe it is a little bit of entertainment value for him.
But right now he's recruiting against Last Chance U. I mean, he's taking the guy that punched the gal in the face in the bar. I mean, he's not competing against major college teams.
Though.
He's competing against the Florida penitentiary system.
That's my
what
point.
he's competing against.
That's my point. Maybe he's like a little bit bored on the recruiting trail. Maybe he's like, you know what, I want to relive some of my memories too and go back and hashtag 2009 when I flipped a recruit from Bama. I mean, that's his way of getting
There's a part of this that sort of feels like the guy on Facebook who keeps showing like photos of him when he's in high school with his uniform on.
Yeah.
There's a lot of reminiscing going on here.
Yeah. The guy that doesn't want to show up to the 20-year reunion because he's not
maybe gained a little weight or something along those lines. That may very well be true. All right, item number 9, AT&T SEC Country Live, first and 10 here. So apparently they don't have the internet in State College, Pennsylvania. The area they call Happy Valley, one of the reasons they stay so happy is apparently they're not kind of plugged into what's going on around the world, because what the Penn State and Nittany Lion fans maybe don't know is that the folks in the past who've chanted, we want Bama, it hasn't exactly worked out so well. As evidence of what I'm talking about here are Penn State fans last Saturday night, or this past Saturday night, and their victory against Michigan. Listen, it was a good win for the Nittany Lions, but was it good enough to start putting yourself in that conversation of teams that could possibly beat Alabama? Well, the folks in white and blue apparently think so. Here's what they did during the game. We'll show it to you. So I like the wide out. I like the white shakers. I think the Beaver Stadium is actually a pretty cool place to be on a Saturday night. But the "we want Bama" maybe not the world's best idea, maybe not the most creative, the best thing to do. In fact, a Georgia player, McCole Hardman, saw this on Twitter. He tweeted back out himself, LOL, one game at a time. And if you're a Georgia fan, you love that. The Georgia wide receiver not going to get caught up in some of that trash talk there, saying take it one game at a time. Should Penn State take the advice from McCole Hardman and leave the "we want Bama" talk until you actually get ready to play Alabama?
I mean, and you know what I'm going to say. I'm going to say absolutely you should take it one game at a time. And listen, they've got a couple of big ones coming up. They're playing Ohio State this week at Ohio State, Michigan State the next week at Michigan State. So Penn State probably needs to slow their roll a bit, and their fans need to understand, hey, we need to win the next 2 weeks. We're even going to have that chance. I thought Dan Wetzel put out a good tweet, too. I mean, he goes on Twitter and says, you know what, that's really cute, but the last 2 teams from the Big Ten that have gone in the playoff have lost by a combined 69-0. So that's really cute, but Michigan is Michigan and Alabama is Alabama, and that continues to stay that way until Penn State makes it there.
Have you ever noticed this, though? Nobody ever wants Clemson. Now, I know Clemson's lost a game. I do get that. Clemson's lost a game. They're the defending national champions.
Well, yeah.
Have you ever noticed that when people, and maybe "we want Clemson" just doesn't have the same ring to it, and Alabama's been around for longer, but that's kind of the point that I'm bringing up here. Alabama is still the benchmark by which all college football teams are measured, and it's not because they're currently ranked #1. It's because Alabama's Alabama. For those of you who are my age, remember when Mike Tyson was a boxer? He wasn't always the heavyweight champion of the world, but he was always the baddest man on the planet and the guy that you measured yourself by. Yeah. This is such an example of that for me. Clemson's got the belt, but Alabama's got the prestige. Yeah. Penn State, in choosing who it wants to measure itself against, they're going to choose Alabama more so than the defending champion Clemson. I think that's kind of interesting.
Yeah, and it's not like Bama hasn't been beaten the last 10 years, but you do go back on the last 10 years and understand that Nick Saban has been the benchmark. And then Alabama, Clemson did catch fire last year. They made it there the year before, but I mean, look where they were when Alabama and Nick Saban were doing things in 2008, 2009, 2010. That wasn't the same Clemson team, and so I think that's where that comes. It's been 10 years now for Nick Saban doing these things, and people do around college football understand that right now Nick Saban is the benchmark to get it done. I think they've only lost one conference game each year in the past 10 years since Nick Saban's been there, if one. And so I think that when you look at that and you are Penn State and you're trying to get to that next level, then maybe you do want them in the crosshairs.
Jessica K. Lindquist says Clemson is in the dynasty, and Jessica, I think that's exactly right, that Alabama's got that sort of dynastic quality right now that Clemson just does not have. James Crump says Penn State needs to worry about Ohio State, and that's true. I mean, I would take Ohio State right now, early in the week, but my really lean in that game is Ohio State over Penn State, even though the Nittany Lions have been on a bit of a roll.
By the way, 6.5-point favorite is Ohio State this weekend at home. I think that tells you all you need to know that they've lost the game, but they're still an incredibly dangerous football team. That's why I think it is interesting. Penn State fans chanting, "We want Bama." You probably need to look at the next 2 weeks of that schedule and understand that that's a couple big hurdles.
Ray Duke says, come on, BA, Clemson ain't making the playoff. Why on earth would they chant "we want Clemson"? First of all, Clemson's not out of it. Let's not act like it's over for Clemson. But here's the thing. Even before Clemson lost, it was still "we want Bama," not "we want Clemson." Right. That's true all over college football.
Right. And I agree. And I think it's just the longevity. Like I said, the Nick Saban's been doing it for quite some time where they've been in the national championship picture for the last 10 years. And they've been in every college football playoff so far, and no other team has been able to do that going back to 2014.
No, we got a really funny champion of life. We'll give that to you coming up. We'll also take a look at the upcoming slate of games in the SEC this Saturday. Before that, though, let's do item number 10 on our AT&T SEC Country Live First and 10 list. And I don't know, maybe this is unfair, but with Shea Patterson, the Ole Miss quarterback, getting injured and ending his season on Saturday in the loss to LSU, the future of Patterson kind of comes into focus here a little bit. This is a guy that's essentially leading the SEC in passing. In terms of passing yards per game, he's tops in the list. He's having a really good season. But with him injured here, what's the next best move for him? Is it just about his time going to the NFL draft for the spring of 2019? Should he consider packing up and leaving an Ole Miss program that has nothing going for it, doesn't even know who its head coach is going to be next year, and maybe trying to be the finishing piece for another program's national championship? What should Shea Patterson do next?
Well, I think the biggest thing he has to do is sit here and look at the next 3 or 4 month window till he's going to be back to health and understand that at the end of that, there is going to be a new coach on campus at Ole Miss. And I think that's kind of the first step is say, hey, I'm going to take a back seat, I'm going to rehab here, I'm going to go through surgery, and then I'm going to find out who the coach is. If we get a good coach in, hey, maybe Shea Patterson comes back. Maybe he doesn't want to leave and change things up. Maybe he wants to come back and be around his teammates and guys that he's comfortable with, understanding that they have a very good receiving core at Ole Miss. So maybe he does get a chance next year to do some things. But I do think there's that slight 10% chance that he starts looking at his future and looking at Ole Miss and understanding, hey, this is a small window for me. Yeah. maybe a change of scenery is best. Maybe I don't want to stick it out through some of the sanctions that Ole Miss is going to go through. Maybe I want to rehab and pick up my football and go somewhere else and be able to resurrect a program and get back in the scene to try to win some kind of championship.
Young man may very well be a very rich guy at some point in time in the NFL draft, but for right now it appeared to be a bit of a lost college career for a very good player in Ole Miss quarterback Shea Patterson. This is AT&T SEC Country Live. AT&T, a proud sponsor of SEC Country Live. AT&T, entertainment your way. And speaking of AT&T, let's do our AT&T look ahead right now and take a look at the big slate of games coming up for you this Saturday. We'll talk about a lot of those this week, including Patterson's team, Ole Miss, without Patterson playing against Arkansas. Boy, that is not a good football game. Georgia, Florida at 3:30, though, is a good football game. Mississippi State, Texas A&M, not a bad game, especially with the way that Mississippi State has played as of late. Maybe Butch Jones playing for his job. It's 7:30 against Kentucky. What do you make of that slate for next week?
I think it's a pretty good one. Obviously there's some games that you think are going to be lopsided. I think Georgia and Florida is going to carry the torch. Arkansas and Ole Miss, it's like battle of who's going to be worse this season. I think it's so funny, too, to look at that schedule and see Missouri against UConn.
Yeah.
I mean, who is making this non-conference schedule?
Oh, my God.
Idaho last week, they got housed by Purdue early in the year. It's like, hey, let's see what kind of smorgasbord of teams we can throw together and play Missouri this year.
And then Arkansas-Ole Miss game, a battle of seeing who's worse. In that game, we all lose. All right, let's close up the show the way we do each and every day. Much like Tennessee coach Butch Jones looking for his champions of life, we're looking for ours here as well. And today, it's an actual champion of life. This is not even like some sort of snarky, sarcastic thing the way we normally do. I'm actually super impressed by this. Did you see the way that ESPN's College Game Day started on Saturday, live from State College, Pennsylvania? The longtime host Lee Corso, who's battled some health problems as of late, but was in full health on Saturday as he was crowd surfed by the Penn State students here. You see the Penn State mascot getting moved. How about Lee Corso also here getting moved by the Penn State fans? I've got nothing snarky to say about this. This is full-on amazing that Corso would do this. There's not a chance in the world I'd let somebody do that.
Yeah, especially when you look at his age and the health problems he had. I think it's incredible. I'm with you. Complete respect for the champion of life and for Lee Corso. He's been an incredible part of college football for the last 30 years since he's been on College Game Day, and I love seeing him have fun. I mean, he kind of struggles through some of the game day broadcasts. See him tuned in and just kind of floating along the crowd. To me, I don't know, it made me really happy.
Yeah, clearly his speech has been affected by the strokes that he's dealt with, and maybe his knowledge of college football is not what it once was, but his entertainment value on television is just as high as it ever was, and I mean that in all sincerity.
No, he's the grandfather of college football right now, I'm telling you.
All right, good stuff there. That's Mike Johnson. I'm Brandon Adams. Thanks for being here with us today on AT&T SEC Country Live. Don't forget, we'll have the podcast up for you at iTunes. Love to have you subscribe to that. Share the show with your friends on Facebook. Let them know we're talking SEC with you each and every day on AT&T SEC Country Live, and we'll see you tomorrow right back here once again at 3 p.m. Eastern Time. Y'all have a good day.